Well, joining us now to discuss this further is retired Air Vice-Marshal Sean Bell. Hi again, Sean. It's really interesting, isn't it, the Polish president meeting Western leaders in London today. Certainly, they've increased their defence spending significantly in the last few weeks. And understandably, Eastern European countries are a lot more worried about this war than perhaps Western European countries.
Absolutely, but it is interesting why the Polish leader, Duda, is seemingly at the forefront of all this. He was visiting Rishi Sunak ostensibly to talk about the support to the Ukraine conflict, but that was following a visit to the NATO Secretary General Stoltenberg, where he was looking at how do you bolster the defence on the eastern flank of NATO as well. But all of this is the Russian invasion of Ukraine was just not anticipated by the West, and there's lots of NATO countries. NATO was a bit in the doldrums. A lot of countries were not paying their way. Suddenly, this invasion's on their doorstep, and they desperately need to find ways not just to increase defence spending, but to create credible military capability. Let's look at Poland in particular, though, looking at the geography of the place. Now, for war, Putin's invaded Ukraine, but it's pretty clear that his ultimate ambition is to restore the Soviet Union.
Sure.
And if we look at a map, clearly we've got Belarus here, which is already in Putin's pocket. If he's invaded Ukraine, depending on how the outcome of that comes, the next countries on the front line are Estonia off the top there, Latvia, Lithuania, and then Poland. And so it's no great surprise that Poland has had a massive increase in defence spending, but it's also really interested in how you translate that money into credible deterrence military capability, and that's the challenge. These diplomatic efforts will continue once he leaves the UK. I think on the 20th to the 22nd of this month, President Biden's visiting Poland. All of that is trying to increase focus on how Poland enhances its deterrence capability.
OK, let's move to the war on the ground now. Tell us the latest in terms of the latest missile strikes that have hit Ukraine in the last 24 hours. And of course, you know, this latest offensive, which we have been anticipating, by all accounts, has begun.
Yeah, another 32 missiles that were fired across Ukraine. Ukraine claims they've shot down half of them. They seem to be targeting Lviv and Dnipro across the country. But the real story is the intensity of fighting massively increased, as you say, this offensive which we've been anticipating. The main focus of that offensive has been around the Donbass region. It's been around Bakhmut, which we've been talking about for some time, Volodar down by your feet there, Crimea and north of that. But it's worth remembering there's 1,200 kilometres of front line here. Russia will be pushing away at all, trying to find any defences. The scale is phenomenal, though. Ben Wallace, our defence minister, talking the other day, said that about 97% of the available Russian military was actually deployed, that they'd taken about a 40% hit in terms of combat effectiveness because they were suffering. The Russians were suffering World War I levels of attrition. Just shows the scant disregard they have for their soldiers. But also, they seem to have lost about 2/3 of their available tanks, have either been destroyed or are no longer available, which is probably why Putin was pushing so hard to get his industry to produce more. The real challenge for Ukraine throughout all this is trying to weather this storm. They do not want to get trapped into a war of attrition, which is something they would struggle to win. They've got to make some decisions at times. Do you fight or do you withdraw gracefully, ready to fight another day? Volodar, they're fighting stoically, and some of these pictures are actually part of the Russian withdrawal because the Russians sent in there as part of their elite naval forces to fight, to try and take Volodar, and they've been thoroughly decimated and they're retreating in their droves. The Russian offensive is on its way. Ferocity of fighting is increasing dramatically. It's going to be a very difficult next few weeks, but almost certainly will prove decisive to the outcome of the war.
Yeah, it certainly feels like we've reached a very tense moment. Sean, thanks again.